Welcome to episode 312 on the Church Solutions podcast. My name is Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacy.
Did you get that, Steve? I actually announced the episode this time.
Awesome.
After like 10 years of doing this, finally. And I always call it edition or whatever, but everybody calls episodes now. So we've been doing this longer than that. But that's what Apple says. Apple says we have 300. This is 312, according to Apple.
All right.
And, Apple's always right.
For sure.
Aren't they? Okay. Steve, how are you today?
Doing good.
All right. Good deal. I mentioned last week, and I'll mention this again today, that I asked people to pray for my son who was in the hospital with COVID-19 complications. We brought him home yesterday, and so he is doing much better. He still probably has to have some surgery. He's got fluid on his lungs, and he'll probably have to have some surgery coming up here, but he's doing much better. So I wanted to let people know about that and thank them for praying for him. So thank you, everyone. And if you continue to pray for him, that would be wonderful. So we're pretty happy over here in the Thompson family. So today we have a guest that we've had on here several times. His name is Paul Steinbrueck, and Paul is celebrating Oktoberfest. He's got his hat on because of his your background, I guess. That's that German background, right, Paul?
That's right, Steinbrueck.
Yeah, Steinbrueck. Yeah, go ahead. Good German background. So Paul, in case you didn't know, Paul and his brother Mark founded ourchurch.com, and we kind of partner somewhat with you guys. Ourchurch.com. You guys started that way back in 1996, before JSL Solutions started. We started 20 years ago. You guys are like 25 years old now. You started before there was internet, right? No, I guess the internet was gone. But anyhow, he's the CEO, and he leads in the strategic planning of this, and manages projects, blogs, and other things as well. We've talked about this before. Let me put my glasses on, but you oversee the software development and technical operations. You got 3 kids, and you serve in your church as an elder. You're a leader there and all that stuff. You also play soccer, which we won't hold that against you, but and we also know that you root for Tampa Bay and the Rays got eliminated from the playoffs. Sorry about that, Paul.
Unfortunately, yes. It
happens. Okay. All right. So we'll talk about how you can connect with Paul, but a great company and great people over there. And we thought, along with Steve and I, we thought that it would be good. You published an article recently, an article called "Is It Time for Churches to Stop Live Streaming Services?" And we thought it would be good. We're streaming church.tv as well as other things. And we thought it would be good to get somebody's perspective that's unbiased, right? Of course, we would say, oh, no, you should not stop streaming. We would say that as a company. But I thought it would be good to get your thoughts on this. And so we're going to turn this over to you and Steve and me. And let's talk a little bit about, should churches stop streaming their live services now that the pandemic's, it's still there, but it's not as prevalent, I guess. And so let's get your perspective on this, Paul. What do you think about this? Should we stop streaming?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, thank you, Phil and Steve, for having me back on. It's great to be with you all again. And Phil, really good to hear your son is out of the hospital. So yeah, so should churches stop streaming? I've heard this a few times. And I think it comes primarily from churches who weren't live streaming before the pandemic, and then they got shut down, and they were like, well, now we have to live stream. And so now, that the pandemic is waning and people are, churches are meeting back in person again, they're kind of like, well, how long do we have to keep doing this? It's kind of like the tone that I hear behind it. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm hearing it. I think churches that were live streaming before the pandemic, they're going to keep live streaming after. But those, who jumped on are now kind of wondering, well, do we still need to keep doing this? And I think it's just helpful to think through why are we live streaming? Why is your church live streaming? Because there's lots more benefits to it and lots more people who you can reach beyond just people who weren't coming to church and may still not be coming to church at this point.
Yeah.
So I think that's really helpful to look at. And so, there's people who may not be in your church building on a particular week because they're sick, because they're quarantined because of COVID, because they're disabled or shut in, because they're out of town, or even people who are looking for a new church. And so these are all really good reasons to continue streaming. Even if you weren't streaming before the pandemic, you've got your system up and going, you've got some routines and processes, so you still have a lot of benefits to streaming if you continue to do it.
So you kind of mentioned this in the article, but the pastors are thinking, I got hit by this COVID thing and my doors got shut down. And then, so I lost all my people, and then I started streaming. And now that, people are going, out to business, going back to church again, I still got these people that aren't coming around, that are watching on the streaming. Maybe I should just turn that off, right? Because then I can get them to come back and I can get back to my pre-COVID numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, that's pretty prevalent out there, is that not? Or is that, what are what's good and bad about those thought processes about, well, I'll turn this off and they'll force them to come back?
Yeah, well, I do think that there is a little bit to that. I think every church knows of probably some families that were active before the pandemic and still haven't come back. And, I think we tend, well, I shouldn't say we, but sometimes we tend to make assumptions about why people aren't coming back. And sometimes it can be like, well, it's too convenient. People are lazy. They'd rather just watch church in their pajamas and all of that. And so if we take away the convenience of live streaming, then they'll come back, is sometimes the mindset behind it. And I don't know that that's the best mindset to have. It could work in some cases, but I think there are other things to look at, I guess, other things to consider than that.
Yeah, well, there are. Go ahead, Steve.
we tend to, there's I promote that the easiest way to invite somebody to church is to invite them to your online stream first, because the barrier to entry is very low. You don't have to get out of bed. You don't have to get out of your pajamas. You don't, and you can invite people to show up. And I think that a lot of people today have learned that, like we were talking about, that they can do that. And so I think what's happened here is we've kind of created this crowd of people that are at this low engagement level, I guess, or what are your thoughts on that? And is that, do you keep them there? Do you cut them off? Do they, it's kind of, what are your thoughts about that whole kind of segmenting I know I'm guilty. I'm still very guilty of, wow, it's going to be really church this weekend because we got this, and this, but we can go on Saturday night online and be fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is a challenge. And so I do think, in terms of people who have participated in the live stream but never come to a service, and now they're maybe low engagement. And I do think that churches need to think through, well, what can we do to try to help get those people better connected, help them to come in and participate in person? Because I personally believe that you can't really experience church without the relational aspect of it, without interacting with people and getting to know people. And if you're just live streaming and it's kind of like you're the audience and you're watching the church show, I don't really think that's the way that God intended church to be. I think he intended it to be an interactive, participatory experience. And if you're only watching at home, you're really missing out on a lot of the relational aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I think there are things that churches can do in terms of trying to reach out to the people who are just watching the live stream. But I also think that churches might need to think a little bit more about how they do their services, because the service, if you can just watch your service online and it's really the same as being there, then your service probably isn't as relational and interactive and all of those things that it should be and that it could be. I really think that the live stream that we do should cause people to want to be there in person. And really feel like they're getting something, but they're missing out on the full experience of being there.
Yeah. Well, let me get back, and I'll cut Steve off again here, but let me get back to why it might be a good idea to keep streaming. Like for instance, I brought my son home yesterday, and they didn't do surgery on him because the test he had Saturday said that he was still positive for COVID-19. And so he was stable and everything. And we kept wondering, why aren't they going to do surgery? Why aren't they talking to him? And found out, and even the doctor at the hospital said he didn't know this, but they weren't going to do anything until he was negative. So we brought our son home. We've been vaccinated and everything. We brought him home and everything. But technically, I mean, I've probably been exposed to COVID-19. And so I even talked to a friend of mine this morning because he was going to come over and watch the World Series with me. Sorry, the Rays aren't in it. But, I told him, I said, hey, look, Adam, I've been, probably been exposed. I mean, there's a chance my son's negative now, but, we won't know until he's tested. And I said, Adam, you just need to know I've been exposed to COVID-19 probably. And I was pretty sure he told me what I thought he was going to say. And he goes, because of my wife and everything, he goes, we better not get together until you're quarantined, until you go through the 10 days or whatever. And I totally understand that. But there's still a pandemic out there. There's still exposure. And even if you've been vaccinated, they say you can still have it or at least carry it. So, there's the issue of being quarantined. There's the issue of even illness. People, even if they're not infected with COVID-19, some people are just not healthy, and it's hard for them to get to an experience like a worship service or something. And then you've got, people that are out of town. I probably got us off track here. Sorry, but I was just thinking,
where are you going, Phil?
Well, I was just thinking, about why, and I am making the case why you should still stream, and that's really Paul's job. but I just think people need to see a bigger perspective. It's not just about them, It's about other people.
Well, and just to add to that, Phil, I think people also are being a lot more careful about going out when they're not 100%, So 2 years ago, if you have the sniffles or a cough on a Sunday morning, maybe you still go to church. But now, you're like, well, I don't really know what I have here. So probably best just to stay home because I don't want to accidentally expose somebody. And I don't want to make people uncomfortable being around me also, So I think you're right. I think more people are staying home with minor illnesses or possible COVID. And so that makes the live stream more important than it was before even.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, get us back.
I was just going to mention the microcosm of our small group that we meet. And we went just kind of illustrating what you were talking about earlier, Paul, about the relationship element. And that we were meeting via Zoom for, I don't know, maybe too long, I guess. And while it was, while it was good and it was the ability to, interact and that sort of, it was not the same as when we started meeting back in person again. So the relationship level, just the ability to see people in person and body language and all of that, it's a deeper experience than sitting at home. Plus you're getting into that in a different environment and being outside your home and in a different building, a different place, and it just kind of does something to your psyche, I think, other than sitting in your pajamas snacking on popcorn, watching the service. You go, oh, let's go. You're much more easily distracted and with online versus the being in person kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's really but I do think, and I think you may argue this, I don't know, is that we have Rick Warren made really popular the 101, 201, 301, or the bases for kind of moving people along the maturity path within their church. And I think we added a new base, really a base that's kind of just right before first base. It's halfway to first base, maybe. And that is the streaming piece. It gets them in the game. We're playing, we're getting some experience, but you do need to, I agree, you do need to have that in-person experience to really grow and have the rich relationships. But I think that most churches, and I've talked to a bunch of people now that they're going to keep the streaming, even if they just started the streaming, because they created a whole new audience or a whole new way of doing church that wasn't very vibrant before. And they've got these, people in the stream, and they'll come to church, every other week or so, but it's just super convenient, like you said, when they can't get to church, to go to church. So anyway, just my 2 cents on the topic. You've got some other things here on the pros and cons of the whole, should I stop streaming, start streaming?
Yeah. And Steve, just to address that, I think you're right that there is sort of in a sense, there's a half base now between home and first base in that paradigm. And so I think churches really do need to be strategic about what do we do to move people from just watching on the live stream to first base, which might be just participating in a service online. And so there should be some strategy sessions and some processes put in place to reach out to those people and try to move them along.
You could call it the bench, get people on the bench, and then before they go in the game.
What's that?
I was just saying you could call it the bench, get people from the stands into the bench, on the bench, and then they could eventually get into the game, if you're using a baseball analogy here.
Oh, well, I was equating online to they're in the game, they just haven't made it to first base yet.
I would say they're on a team, but we won't cover about that. All right, so
we're nitpicking our analogies apart.
Yes.
So, like you said, this introduces a whole new element to church that you need to be considerate of. And you may be cutting off your farm team for keeping our analogies alive here, cutting off the farm team if I cut off my streaming, right? And not going to have anybody moving up to the team.
You could, yeah. And so I think a part of it too is really thinking through what are you doing at your church building before, during, and after your services that are going to make it, that can really entice people to be a part of the service in person. And so you can think about things like, do you have a coffee hour before, sometime with snacks and coffee and interaction beforehand or afterwards that helps the relational component of it. And in the service itself, like my church, I know is unusual, but not unusual in this belief. But our belief is that God speaks through all believers, not just the paid pastors. And so we actually have time in our service where people can offer prayer and prayer requests. We have opportunities for people to give testimonies and share stories about how God has been at work in their life in the last week. It's kind of like an open mic time in our thing. And I know that wouldn't work in the culture of many churches, but those are essential parts of our church. And so for people who don't show up in person on Sunday, they miss out on the opportunity to share what God is doing in them and through them. And so that's a big part of the reason why we don't have a lot of people sitting on their couches. Like as soon as they can get back, they're back in person because they miss all of that interaction and their ability to contribute in the service. So I think those are ways that church leaders can challenge themselves to say, hey, what else can we do to make this interactive, relational, allow people to participate in different ways that maybe they haven't been able to before.
Yeah. One of the things that as I look at it, I'm looking at the strategies. One of the things that's going on at our church, I don't know if it's a strategy or just happened that way, but we're building out a very relational coffee table, shaded umbrella kind of thing. We have a big courtyard, and the courtyard was just a big empty courtyard where the sun was beating down on the hot patio, and they've converted that into a very livable and social space. And they started doing some things where, as the service dismissed, they closed the doors that would go out one way and redirect everybody to go through, that courtyard area to get out of the building. So it kind of, it just kind of promoted what you're talking about, is fostering that relationship that you get in a real live experience that you might not see as part of the online experience.
Yeah, and I think too, if the more that you can show those things in your live stream, the better it's going to give people, help them to connect to what else is going on. So I don't know exactly how you do that, but if there's ways to show what it looks like when you're walking into the building and coming through the relational social areas, if you have a way of showing not just the pastor, but show the congregation during the service, those are all things that help the home watcher, the home viewer, to connect with people and to see what else is going on, and frankly, to see what they're missing out on by not being there in person.
So, okay. So just kind of summarizing kind of pros and cons. If I'm a pastor just looking at this, hey, I'm, a lot of them are spending money on their streaming, and they're getting people that are in, not coming to church. From the pro side, I could save a little bit of money, and maybe a small percentage of those people will come back to my church or the pros of stopping streaming. And then the pros of continuing streaming are kind of what we've been talking about now, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right that really the only pros would be, like, maybe you save a little bit of money, maybe you save somebody a little bit of time, but by now you're probably already budgeting both the time and the money for it, so you're probably not really missing it at this point. But yeah, the pros are so many, like we talked about, all the different people who you're able to connect with, who might not be able to make it to church, the ability to give people an easy on-ramp, ability to check out a service before they actually come. There's a lot of pros in there.
Yeah. And theoretically, what we've been talking about the last decade or more as a company here, because we do streaming, is that it's a great opportunity for outreach. People are going to look, as you have talked about with ourchurch.com, people, one of the first things people do if they're looking for a church, they go to a website, and you want the website to look good. And then if you've got video on there, that's even better, because people get an idea. It creates windows, so to speak, for people looking in from the outside. What is your church like? What's the style? What do you guys believe? And kind of like love in action. You get to see the service in action. And as you were saying earlier, Paul, if you do it well, it can actually give people some good thoughts about maybe showing up to this thing eventually would be a good idea, because they like what they see, they like the interaction. So I think those things are very important. But as you have said in this article here, which is actually, we're going to publish it on our blog, which is blog.streamingchurch.tv, so people can go and take a look at it and get a better feel for what we're talking about here. But yeah, I think, Jesus went to where the people were. His followers, his disciples, his apostles always end up going to where the people were gathered. And guess where many people are gathered today? Online. They're looking online, and so having a presence online, I think, is just a positive thing that can enhance what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. I don't know that I can add much more to that, but I totally agree.
All right. Well, Paul, we're talking to Paul Steinbrueck here from ourchurch.com. Paul, how can people get a hold of you? You guys have some really good stuff. We offer website templates too, but you guys offer even more. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can go to our website at ourchurch.com, and you can find out more information about both the do-it-yourself websites that we offer, and also the custom design sites that we do. And we also do search engine optimization for Christian churches and ministries and businesses, because we want people to be able to find you when they're searching for your church or your business. You can find all of that information on our website at ourchurch.com. And we also blog usually 2 or 3 times a week. And so at ourchurch.com/blog, you can connect with us there. You can subscribe if you want to get an email with an article each week, and just take it from there.
Super.
I get your newsletter, and yeah, it's good. It's very good. Often, all the times, a lot of times we'll say, we need to call Paul and see if we can get him on the podcast to talk about this one. That's kind of how we got you here today. So yes, I encourage people to sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah. Before we wrap up here, I want to encourage people to check out mychurchdaily.com. That's a product that we have recently developed here with this company. Mychurchdaily.com gives you an opportunity to actually be on Alexa, Amazon Echo devices, and you could actually have a flash briefing. You could do it every day if you wanted to, and it's really not that hard to do. You can put together an audio file, use mychurchdaily.com as the tool to make that happen. Upload an audio file. We'll help you do it. We've got some help videos, and we've got some suggestions. And speaking of reaching out and connecting with your congregation, the flash briefing that Amazon Alexa devices offer are just great ways to do that. So check out mychurchdaily.com. It's something we think you might like. So
yeah, our church has published many years ago a daily devotional for every day of the year that was custom authored, and they have put their daily devotional to Amazon Alexa.
Yeah. All right, good. All right. Sounds good. All right. So we've been pushing our stuff here. We sure thank Paul for being with us. Thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk with you guys too. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah. And Steve, likewise, we always like your input.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, even if you disagree with my analogies, that's okay. And but most of all, thank you for listening or watching, or both, the Church Solutions podcast. You can subscribe. Just go to wherever you get your podcast and subscribe to Church Solutions podcast. And if you need anything technical or otherwise, we have a lot of resources. Paul's one of them. And we've got people on our staff that are great. So if we can help your church or ministry, please reach out to us, support@streamingchurch.tv. My name is Phil Thompson. Please take care of yourself. We'll catch you next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.